marginal size with very little growth potential. Inconsistent anchor, occasionally struggles when opponents run at him, can be overwhelmed by bigger, longer-limbed blockers, often takes himself out of position to make a play. These were just some of the criticisms that Bleacher Report had on Aaron Donald in the aftermath of the 2014 NFL Draft. While they might seem surprising now, especially after seeing what a spectacular success Donald has been in the league, Bleacher was hardly alone in these concerns. It seems like everyone and their mother was writing about how Donald would be limited in the run game. They questioned how his diminutive frame would fare in the NFL, where defensive linemen are typically well over 300 pounds, compared to his svelte 6 foot 1 inch 280-pound frame. Of course, that seems laughable now, but these ideas about Donald were contagious, and they spread around like wildfire, tanking his draft stock despite the fact that he exemplified dominance and professionalism during his time at Pitt. And listen, I get it. Being taken number 1 overall in the NFL draft is quite a prestigious honor. While it's not an exact science, because depending on which team holds the first overall pick, the position chosen might change, but it basically says that you are the most coveted asset in all of college football. And while not every first overall pick pans out exactly how the team drafting him plans it, it shouldn't come as a surprise that there have been some absolute legends taken in that first overall slot. Peyton Manning went from the number 1 overall pick in 1998 to a 5-time NFL MVP and a 2-time Super Bowl champion who basically set every passing record imaginable during his career. Earl Campbell burst onto the scene in Houston after being taken first overall in the 1978 draft and basically turned the entire franchise around. They went from perennial bottom dwellers to Super Bowl contenders basically overnight. Injuries got to Campbell, but even so, 8 seasons was more than enough for him to go down as a surefire Hall of Famer. Same thing with Bruce Smith in 1985. Not only did he lead the Bills of all teams to 4 straight Super Bowl appearances, but he also put together an epic 19-year career and retired as the all-time NFL sack leader. Those are the kinds of talents that we expect to come out of the first overall pick in the draft. Guys that put up truly epic performances once they get into the league, like maybe someone who won back-to-back NFL Defensive Player of the Year awards, or got selected to 6 straight Pro Bowls and 5 straight first-team All-Pros with no sign of slowing down. Someone like Aaron Donald. After all, since being taken 13th overall in the 2014 draft out of Pitt, Donald has been insanely dominant at nearly unprecedented levels. Not only is he one of just 3 players to win back-to-back Defensive Player of the Year awards, but he's done it all by performing under duress like few defensive linemen have ever faced. Donald gets double-teamed on over 60% of his pass rush snaps, yet he is still one of the most effective players in the league in terms of beating blockers within 2.5 seconds, which is a commonly used measuring post. But the reality of the situation is, of course, the NFL draft doesn't always end up going according to plan, and the best players can't always get taken first. There are just some years that teams go into the draft with the first overall pick and miss big. Like when the Oakland Raiders made the decision to take Jamarcus Russell, who essentially set the entire franchise back a decade. Or when the Bengals ownership opted to use the number 1 overall pick in 1995, or Kejana Carter, who retired with never having rushed for more than 464 yards in a single season. Or the Tim Couch decision in Cleveland, the quarterback the Browns took with the number 1 overall pick in 99. No matter how much NFL scouts were over the moon with Couch, he just couldn't seem to find success in the pros and flamed out of the NFL within 5 seasons. The fact of the matter is, talent evaluation is far from a perfect science, and while these big-time misses don't happen every single year, it is shockingly common for us to see generational talents fall a little bit further in the draft than we could ever imagine. Like with Aaron Donald, the Los Angeles Rams superstar defensive lineman, who has proven pretty much without a shadow of a doubt that he is the best defensive player in the entire NFL, maybe even the best overall player on either side of the ball. Obviously, Donald will probably never be able to get the kind of credit and acclaim that a quarterback like Pat Mahomes would get because of how the media treats quarterbacks versus how it treats defensive linemen. And although many will try to justify that decision, citing the fact that Mahomes did lead his team back to a Super Bowl victory in his 3rd year in the league, but if you remember just a couple of years back, Donald did his part in getting the Rams to the big game by absolutely anchoring the Rams' defense. A defense that not only improved all season long, largely thanks to Donald, but he and the defense also carried the Rams against New England in the Super Bowl. Anytime you hold Tom Brady, Rob Gronkowski, and Julian Edelman to just 13 points, 10 of which came in the fourth quarter after stifling them all night while the offense sputtered about. There is no denying that you did your job at an elite level. Obviously, it was the offense that let Donald and the team down in that game. Anyway, the big question here is not about the perception of linemen and sports media, but rather why in the world was Aaron Donald not the first overall pick in the 2014 draft? After all, he was a unanimous All-American at Pittsburgh and looked about as professionally ready as anyone we had seen in years. Yet for some reason, not one, not two, not three, but 12 teams passed on him. Aaron Donald, the two-time Defensive Player of the Year, who despite being drafted in 2014, was named to the 2010's All-Decade team, fell all the way down to the 13th overall pick where the Rams, who had already passed on Donald once, rectified their previous error and scooped up the all-world defensive tackle. The truth is, even in situations like this, where the decisions being made look so inexplicably bad, there is always some sort of reasoning behind it. And with Donald, the obvious place to start is his size. Something that Mike Waffle, the Rams defensive line coach at the time Donald was drafted, explained to ESPN that he had to beg his peers to overlook. I felt like he was the best college player I'd seen, even when I was in college football at that position, he said. A lot of people didn't like him because he was undersized. I said he's the best player that I'd seen at that position. I had him on my board higher than Jadeveon Clowney at that time, so I made a big push. Waffle continued to detail his draft day stresses as he watched his team take Greg Robinson, the offensive tackle out of Auburn, with the second overall pick in the draft, which never quite delivered the same return on investment that drafting Donald did. After a couple of mediocre seasons to start off his career, Robinson showed up to training camp overweight in 2016, and he went on to have by far the worst season of his young career. Robinson was penalized 12 times in the first 10 games of the season. Overall, he was largely ineffective, and subsequently benched for the team's Week 11 matchup with the New Orleans Saints. The following offseason, the Rams signed longtime NFL veteran Andrew Whitworth, and Robinson's role in the line continued to diminish before being let go at the end of the 2017 season. Now compare that to the first 4 seasons that Donald had for the Rams, and boy does Waffle come out of the draft looking like far and away the smartest person in the organization. The Rams' other decision makers are just lucky that the rest of the teams at the top of the draft were making the same mistakes by sleeping on Aaron Donald. Some of these teams deserve more flack than others too. For starters, there's the Houston Texans. They held the first overall pick in the draft and succumbed to the media hype machine that was bolstering Jadeveon Clowney's draft stock for nearly a full year after a vicious hit he delivered to a Michigan running back during the Outback Bowl in 2013 went viral. And don't get me wrong, while his performance is somewhat inconsistent, Clowney has been a Pro Bowler in the NFL, and at times he's shown flashes of the elite skill set that had NFL scouts drooling over him while he was a Gamecock. But I don't think it's a stretch to say that if you pulled damn near every coach and generational manager in the NFL as to who they would rather have, that Donald would blow Clowney out of the water. I understand that the Texans were looking for more of an edge rusher, and while Donald can play on the exterior of the D-line, he's really more of an interior lineman. But come on, imagine Donald drawing double teams and freeing up some space for J.J. Watt. That would be terrifying. The Jacksonville Jaguars and Buffalo Bills, who picked 3rd and 4th respectively, deserve to catch even more heat than Houston, as Jacksonville took quarterback Blake Bortles and Buffalo took Sammy Watkins. To a lesser extent than Clowney, both Bortles and Watkins have had their moments thus far in their respective careers, but that is exactly what they were, moments, not the sustained level of excellence that we have come to expect from Aaron Donald. Listen, I do understand that you need a quarterback to win in the NFL, but I can't help but feel like Jacksonville knew they were reaching when it came to taking Bortles 3rd overall. I mean, he had shot up draft boards because of a solid last season at the University of Central Florida, but it's not like he was some can't-miss generational quarterbacking prospect. There wasn't even another quarterback taken until Johnny Manziel at 22, and then Teddy Bridgewater at 32, meaning that they could have more than likely been able to take Donald, then trade back into the first round if they were that worried that Blake Bortles was going to get scooped up. But if you ask me, there's a pretty good chance that Bortles is still sitting there at 39 when they were on the clock again in round 2. And as far as Buffalo and Watkins, I am generally low on taking a wide receiver this early in the draft, with the obvious exception being a playoff team that trades up in the draft, thinking they're a playmaking wide receiver away from winning a Super Bowl or something like that. But the Bills were coming off of another sub-500 season and a last-place finish in the AFC East, so I simply can't understand the logic behind them trading up to take a wide receiver that early in the draft. The Raiders, who picked at number 5, got their own generational talent in Khalil Mack, so they were exempt from any criticism, and Atlanta really needed some help on the offensive line, so I get why they took a guy like Jake Matthews at 6. Matthews had elite NFL pedigree and has proven to be a solid pro too. Actually, a lot of the guys taken ahead of Donald ended up being pretty good pros. Between pick 5 and 12, 7 of the 8 players have made at least one Pro Bowl, with the exception being Justin Gilbert, the cornerback that Cleveland took with the 8th overall pick, who has since been bounced out of the league. Mike Evans went 7th overall to Tampa Bay, Anthony Barr 9th to Minnesota, Eric Ebron 10th to Detroit, Taylor Lewan 11th to Tennessee, and finally Odell Beckham Jr. went 12th to the Giants. All of these guys like Donald have been Pro Bowlers, but not all Pro Bowlers were created equal. Beckham's obviously had his issues and is no longer in New York. Ebron is inconsistent, and it's hard to argue the value of a tight end versus an elite defensive lineman. And again, drafting Mike Evans took the Bucs from 4-12 to 2-14. So what does that tell you about taking a wide receiver that early in the draft? Lewan has been great for Tennessee, and they were in desperate need of a solidifier on the O-line. Similarly, the Vikings needed help at linebacker more than anything, so taking Barr made sense for them. But a man doesn't have to suck to know that you passed on a transcendent talent like Aaron Donald, a guy that his former teammate Chris Long has called the best football player in the world, before continuing to explain how at training camp during Donald's rookie season, he already looked like he was ready to waltz into Canton. And to pass on him just because he was undersized and coming out of a lesser respected school like Pitt, or because you were infatuated with another player, in particular a wide receiver, well, that's just shameful. Which player would you have taken first overall in the 2014 NFL Draft? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section down below. If you're new here and you haven't subscribed yet, now's a great time to hit that subscribe button down there as well. If you like the video, then like the video. We'd really appreciate it. And last but not least, don't forget to tune in to TBS every single day for more cool videos. We'll see you next time.